Thank you, Dr. Bala, for inviting Anil. It was such an inspirational talk. This is definitely what we need as youngsters, and the amount of learning that we have got from you is priceless. Um, and I wanted to go over this topic in a way of what happens in my lab, or how we have worked in so far, and also trying to give a way. Obviously it may or may not be suitable for every region of India, but some kind of a basic framework can be developed based upon to suit the local needs. So moving ahead. Okay, I'm sorry, my slides are okay. Okay, so in the terminology that we like to use is called the access center. That's what it has been used ever since the interventional nephrologists started to deal with the dialysis accesses. So it's basically a specialized facility that provides care and maintenance needed for creation, preservation, and restoration of the dialysis access. But this kind of a facility, or a physical facility of this nature, can be broadly divided into a freestanding, which is your own building, not necessarily within the campus of a hospital, not necessarily in the close proximity of a hospital either. But it will be a surgical suite kind of a setup, and it will also give you flexibility to run your own medical offices and physician offices. So this is where I probably will be talking more in terms, and some of the information that I share, being an accreditation committee member for the ASDN and having visited different sites and looking at their setup, kind of want to highlight some of the features which are probably really core needed in any of the access centers, and then you can build upon depending upon your needs. The other way of doing this access center would be in the hospital based. That's where my current work is. Ours is a dedicated access center, but we are within the physical confines of a hospital. So the advantage of that kind of a facility is you can handle both inpatients and patients and as outpatients also. So both of them can be handled. So it kind of expands your capture audience, or your number of patients that you can treat. And many of the access centers, especially in the developing world, are co-share labs where you're sharing the same lab with maybe interventional radiology, or with cardiac cath, or some of them ORs which have been equipped to handle fluoroscopy studies. So either way, whichever kind of a facility that you're conceiving to have for this kind of angio labs, you want to first put up some of the, you have to define what your objective is about. Is this only purely patient care? Is it, will it be expanded to become like a training center to train other young physicians to do these kinds of procedures? Or do you want to take it one step further and get involved with the research aspects of the studies too? It's important to have a clarity in your mind, because every one of these might need additional resources, additional space, a different kind of a philosophy and thinking process, different set of skill sets might be needed too. So when you're starting a new access center, or when you're developing a new access center, it's very important to kind of be clear about your objective. If it is direct patient care, it's much more concise, and it can be modeled in whichever facility that you want to do. But if you're doing training centers, then you need additional resources and manpower and the whole 9 yards. And the next thing is identify what all procedures you want to do. Because when you are setting up an in a center, it's important to not limit yourself to one procedure, but also a broad spectrum of procedures which can be done so that your return on investment will also be high about it. It's not only identifying procedures, but it's also about what all procedures are you trained or your partners are trained in. It's very critical to be not only an aspiration to do a procedure, but also what you can achieve and what you're trained to achieve. So it's very important to kind of identify yourself, define the objective, identify what you want to do, and then the other aspect of this, the reason why we want to do all these things is actually not just doing the procedure. Doing the procedure is actually the easiest part. What you plan for is, what if something goes wrong? How do I handle the complications? What are my resources? I'm Example, you're doing a central vein stenosis, angioplasty, now there is a tear and now there is a bleed in the mediastinum, or something else happens. Or you're putting a catheter and there's a bleed and now there is a pneumothorax or whatever. So how are you going to handle that? What all kind of resources you have? Do you have other specialties who can come and bail you out at a short period of time? Or do you have to send the patient to a hospital? If you have to send them to a hospital, how far is the hospital? How are they going to be transported? What's the average ambulance time that you might take for the patient to be rolled out of your procedure table to a resuscitation room in a hospital? So all these kinds of things, even though they're small, can actually be the weakest link in an access center. So when you're thinking about developing an access center, it's important not to confine your thoughts only to the procedure at hand, but also to the various other situations that you might be encountering with. The other issue is very critical, is when you start establishing yourself as an independent freestanding or an independent practice, there will be turf wars. There will be people who will be who will no more be your friends, even if they were close friends and buddies. So it's important to have a professional relationship with other specialties who you need them to bail out, not just the specialties who need to send you the patients, not only the referring physicians, but also the physicians or the surgeons who you will need to bail you out of a complication. If you're going to do a procedure, someday in your life, you are going to have a complication. So you better be prepared for that. And when you have the working relationship with the hospitals, it's not just about, oh, they're going to take my patient, but also how much you'll be involved in the care of that patient at that time. And because ultimately it's your patient and they end up in that hospital because of your work. So you have to be very careful about what kind of a working relationship you have. Okay. And last but the least, but most critical, is to have a good source of patient referrals. So you not only have a relationship for referrals only, but also to troubleshoot. There are times that you get phone call saying, hey, doctor, I'm just not sure whether I should send this or not. Not everything needs to be sent, because every time a patient has to come and see us, they're losing one day. As it is, our patients are going to dialysis a couple of times a week, and we all know that their quality of life is already compromised. So you should be not only be supporting them only for the procedures, but also non-procedural guidance and troubleshooting them. In these situations, having a small telemedicine or telehealth kind of a concept where they can call in a number, discuss the case, and get some kind of a feedback up front. What it does is it solidifies the confidence, not only the referring people, but also the patient, because the patient knows that you are there for them. So it's important to define certain basic principles when you are developing an access center. Now, when it comes to the requirement, the physical building is, whichever way you design, whether it is on ground floor or top floor or in the basement. My lab is inside the basement. I have to go 2 floors down before I reach my lab. So it doesn't really matter where you are situated, but what is important is when a patient walks in, they should be relaxed. They should be able to feel that comfort upfront. I'll tell you the more the patient is relaxed, the more patient is actually happy with that first impression. The whole procedure and the procedure outcomes and whatever happens downstream can easily be mitigated. But if you have a patient who walks in, is juggling through 10 different corridors, coming up to the front desk, and then having to is already irritated, and then he goes to the procedure and something, even the minor pain, you'll be thinking that you don't know what you're doing. So the first impression, just like the first log, it's very important to have that very good first impression. And one thing that we have and we want to is we know that some complications can happen. Some patients may need to be transported out of the unit. I generally like to see the door which takes the patient out of the unit to the ambulance bay. It's kind of semi-separated from the way the people are. Just it helps them to kind of not get anxious when they see a patient being rolled out for an emergency after a procedure. Now, once the patient comes in, checks in, they're ready, and now they're brought in, the pre and post-op bays, depending upon your volume, you don't really need too many bays for this. And both pre-op and the post-op bays can be multi-use, whether it is before or after. If your average caseload is anywhere between 4 to 8 in a day, you don't really need more than maybe 2 or 3 bays at the most. But the key is having these bays and your nursing staff or monitoring staff in a close proximity, so that there is not too much of a steps that they have to take in reaching where they have to reach. It all helps in improving the efficiency of your work environment. Now, coming to the procedure room, which is the next most critical aspect of an access lab, it needs to be, I don't think I should really spend too much time, because most of these labs have to have certain critical elements, but the design of the lab should be in such a way that there should be free mobility of the staff and your C-arm, a good visibility of your imaging, lighting should be appropriate, or at least you should be able to control the lighting so that you get a much better view. And if you're thinking about doing this for 15 years, 20 years, just remember your eyes are going to be hurt after a few years, and there will be some, will not be young all the time. So you really want to preserve your own eyesight for your own sake with a well-designed procedure room where the radiation comes down and you'll be able to make one view and you can see what's going on. The critical aspects, critical instruments needed, I would recommend a portable CM, especially if you're doing a freestanding. But if you're sharing the lab with somebody else, then you really want to have the instrument which can be suitable for both specialties. I do want to stress upon the procedure table. It really helps to have a good one, because yes, you can do, but you may with a bad one, but you may not be able to do it for long. That means you'll start developing back pain and the whole 9 yards. It is taxing, especially if you have to do more than a couple of cases in a day. You need to have a good intraoperative monitoring setup done, because if you are going to do conscious sedation all by yourself, there's not a CC in the room and other things, you really need to have a technology to help you with that. Another key is you cannot have an angio lab, or you shouldn't be having an angio lab without an ultrasound. Ultrasound is really, really important, because one, it helps you to put your catheters, but two, also in your fistula and graft evaluations also. And many times it bails the out, especially if the fistula is deep or if it is immature and you're missing the cannulation, it helps with that. You have to decide about conscious sedation versus general anesthesia. To be honest with you, in the last 14 years that I've been doing, I had only 2 patients who had to end up going into general anesthesia, not because of anything else, but they were mentally challenged, and they would not stay still. So they had to be put completely under to do the procedure. So most of the procedures for fistulas, including central veins, can be done under conscious sedation. So your needs might not be that high, but anytime you're using conscious sedation, be ready to be able to convert into a general anesthesia. That means your procedure room should be equipped and able to be converted into a general or intubated and ventilated kind of a situation. I cannot stress resuscitation and inventory being in close vicinity to the procedure room. You really don't want to be searching for a crash cart or for that one particular balloon that you want, and then you're already in it, you're doing everything, and then you're like, okay, get me 9x6. Oh, we don't know where 9x6 is, or we have to go to the other building to bring the 9x6. You don't want to be in that kind of a situation. And last but the least, the radiation safety is critical. Every single person who enters that room or who works in the center should be aware of the radiation safety and how to minimize it. Some basic instruments that you really want to have for any fistulograms, I like to think fistulograms as a three-step process, right? You're gaining access to it, then you're interpreting the images, and then you want to intervene. And how you intervene is what differs from lesion to lesion. We like to use an 18 gauge introducer needle, something similar to this. But people have used 18 gauge regular angiocats instead, because that does accommodate an 035 wire. Very rare for catheter insertions, we like to use the 21 gauge, the smaller one, or the microaxis set, which goes through. Some of the basic wires that you want to carry are the Bunsen, which are the uncoated ones. They're a little bit cheaper. If it's a single lesion that you have to deal with and not too much touches course, then Bunsen really works very well. But if you have to cross tough lesions, or you want to get into the artery or anything, then hydrophilic coated guide wires are good. I would at least have one of Roadrunner and one of Amplats in the room. As far as the length, what you're going to use, your practice should dictate as to, do you commonly achieve everything with a 150 or 180. So you need to have a one wire, which is going to be your workhorse every single case that you're opening. And then you can have limited stocks of other kinds of wires. And you definitely, the various sheets that you want to use depending upon the balloon or the stents that you might be using. Among the balloons, I would definitely recommend at least a semi-compliant, ideally non-compliant would be great. But if the cost is a factor, at least a semi-compliant is better than ultra-compliant balloons. Ultra-compliant balloons are great for arteries, but not for tough lesions like the vein and the grafts. Have at least a couple of bailout stents, whether you use it or not, but just to keep it that way, in case if something goes wrong, you might bail yourself out from that. And then one of the things, the reason why I wanted to put this image is, so when you're angioplasting, if you start noticing these kinds of stretches at the edges of the stenosis, those are the kinds of balloons that you want to kind of avoid, because if these edges ever rupture, they not only rupture but tear the vessel out and cause some amount of heartache and more procedure time that you need to work with. If you are using a shared lab, I would suggest that you kind of bargain a dedicated time for your procedures, so that you don't get bumped off to the late evenings or late nights. It's not only bothersome for you, for your life, but also for the patients to come at 6 in the evening or 8 in the evening. But I would definitely suggest that you have a very good working relationship with other specialties and mutually agreed upon policies, because otherwise some of the policies could be limiting for you. One thing that we cannot forget is back office operations for any access centers, your inventory management, your human resource. You cannot depend upon the 2 people that you train to assist you every single day, because they might not show up, or they may have some other issues. So you need to have a pool of people that you may be able to tap into. having said all these things, staff comfort is really important. If you have good staff, happy staff, they are truly part of the team, and then they will help you in improving your efficiency. So that little amount of investment we do in their comfort, like a small break room or where they can relax, or some kind of a coffee maker or regular coffee delivery to the center or something like that, makes a huge impact at the end of the day. I would definitely recommend, I don't know whether how the images get stored, but prolonged image storage and maintaining a good medical records is important, not only for the procedure, but when the patient comes back, you should be able to look up and see what you had actually done and other things. Having the dream is one thing, but whether we can afford the dream is another thing. And finances, how much you're investing, ROI, how many cases you need to do to get this out, all are critical. Do not jump into something that you cannot afford it. There will be some amount of break in time before your practices pick up and able to make money out of this. So it's important to keep all those things in mind, but never ever compromise on the quality, and have some kind of a policy protocols for contingencies. I would skip that. And one last word that I want to stress upon is any access work that we do is a teamwork. There is no I in team. Okay, so there is a me, but not, you can make a me out of it, but there's no I in it. So please, you do this as a multidisciplinary teamwork with a speaker policy, which will greatly help you and in the most difficult times during this practice. Just to summarize, access procedures are mostly outpatient and day procedures. You really don't have to keep anybody in the hospital for observations after a simple angioplasty unless there was a complication. Most of our patients may end up staying for 15 minutes to maybe 30 minutes if they have received a little bit more sedation. But by half an hour, they're all ready to leave out of the access center. If you design your access center really well, it is very cost efficient and can be safe. Good multidisciplinary team approach, have a well-trained back office, and most importantly, always keep the patient in mind. And with that, I'll stop and open for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Lal. I think we had a glimpse of how to go about setting up a lab, but the relevance to our place where standalone centers would be feasible in the near future. But anyway, we needed this guidance. So I think we'll have the discussions after the presentation of other speakers. And Dr.